Our top story this hour: amid heightened tensions between India and China along the line of actual control, China has claimed that India fired warning shots. However, there is no response yet from the Indian side on these accusations made by China. The Chinese Ministry of Defense has put out a statement saying that the shots were fired in presence of the Indian Army and the People's Liberation Army. This development comes days after the Indian and Chinese defense ministers met in Moscow. The diplomatic and military level talks between the two sides have failed to yield any results. Recently, India outflanked China by taking control of strategic heights near Pangong Tso Lake, southern bank. It also thwarted an attempt by the Chinese army to enter into the Indian areas near the southern bank of Pangong Tso Lake in Ladakh. And now for more on this, WION's principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal joins us live. Siddhant, thank you so much. Good morning to you. I want to ask you, what is the latest in this situation? Has there been any response from the Indian Army on this?
Well, it's just about 8 a.m. Indian Standard Time here in Delhi, and we do expect a formal statement by the Indian Army very soon. But sources are now confirming that an incident indeed happened yesterday on Monday between 6:30 to 5:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We are still waiting for details, and what sources are saying that approximately 25 to 30 members of the Chinese army, the PLA, tried to occupy a certain area. We know it looks like there was a repetition of what happened on 29th of August and 30th of August when the Chinese forces tried to occupy the southern bank of Pangong Lake. This, of course, was thwarted by the Indian Army, and now the Indian Army is present in key locations in the southern bank of Pangong Lake, and this, of course, is something that is making the Chinese nervous. But the development which has come on Monday is something of a worrisome nature, given the fact that both sides have been engaging diplomatically at political level as well. In fact, the Indian Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, will be leaving for Moscow today for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's Foreign Ministers meeting. The meet, of course, happens on 10th of September, and there can be an expected meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister as well. There is no official confirmation by the Indian government, but it is expected to happen. We know last week only the first in-principle political meeting happened between the Indian Defence Minister and his Chinese counterpart. This, of course, at the request of the Chinese Defence Minister. We know the meeting lasted for almost more than 2 hours, but the readout by the Indian side, the Chinese side, reiterated what both have been saying. The Indian side, of course, talking about how there needs to be a disengagement, especially by the Chinese in the north bank of Pangong Lake from Finger 4 to Finger 8. So by and large, number of developments happening. Situation remains precarious at the line of actual control, even though both sides have been engaging in conversation. In fact, the ground level commanders meeting has been happening on a daily basis. Yes. But interestingly, it did not happen on Monday.
All right. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all those inputs. We are also being joined by Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Swaran, good morning to you, and thank you for joining us at this hour. How do you assess these statements made by China?
I think it will take time, and both sides will have their own versions. But it appears as if it's a continuing jostling of the space since the recent Indian attempt to preempt Chinese soldiers trying to take a space around Renchin La, and after that they have kind of reinforced themselves on top of both Kala top and helmet top, and now it seems it is at Shenpa mountain, which is where this jostling is happening. But I think serious concern here is that even if it is a warning shots, Indian and Chinese troops were known and almost celebrated for maintaining restraint and not using firearms, as it is understood under various conventions and agreements they have signed, that in border regions the firearms will not be used. And even if warning shots, I think this is the first time after 1987, 86, 87 incident in Samdarum Chu, and I think that really ups the ante. They're crossing more and more red lines in sort of undermining the understanding that they have had so far. And this is particularly concerning that it happens just a day or a little more than a day after defense ministers met in Moscow, and it's happening on eve of foreign ministers meeting tomorrow in Moscow. I think that way it sort of is really scary that this jostling is escalating and the road can be really slippery. And both sides have reinforced their positions around the LOC. Both side forces are very competent in delivering firepower. So these slip-ups, I think, are something that we have to take very seriously. And incidentally, it's also good that the foreign ministers are meeting tomorrow. They will have some opportunity to sort of give direction from the very top.
Professor Swaran, I'm just going to have to intervene for a minute here. We have some exclusive on Indo-China dispute here. Indian army pushed back Chinese army when the latter tried to move towards north of Rezangla on Indian side. This incident happened on Monday evening. The incident occurred between 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Monday. 25 to 50 Chinese troops began moving north of Rezangla. Now, the sources, Chinese soldiers have said that they advanced in Indian territory. Sources in the Indian army fired in warnings. Now, sources have also said that the Chinese soldiers returned after this firing. The incident occurred, as we mentioned before, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. on Monday. Now, Professor Swaran, I'm going to come back to you. And what do you make of these developments? How do you think this is going to affect the relations in the coming weeks? What do you think they stand to gain at this point?
It's definitely going to make tensions go still higher, tempers go higher on both sides, particularly as India is in middle of COVID-19, and it looks very, sort of strange that the Chinese are ratcheting up constantly on the border.
Yes.
Both sides have to sort of defend their sovereign territories. There is no doubt about it, but the timing is curious. And I think that incidentally makes most experts believe in consensus that Chinese are looking at this as an opportune time to really, push their neighbors across from South China Sea, Japan and Senkaku Islands on the way to Ladakh. And that is something which is unbecoming of China, particularly when there were enormous amount of confidence building that had been sort of created over a period of time. We were seeing informal summits happening recently. And suddenly this U-turn where such a tension is being built on the border, and I'm saying undermining all the mechanisms, all the understandings, all the mannerisms that had evolved over last almost 2 decades where we had come to an understanding of really how to handle tensions on the border. And now suddenly, new cards are being played. Multiple points on the LOC are being sort of ratcheted up for encounters. Enormous build-up on the border. New points on LAC, which are called grey areas, are being created, which were not in confusion before. And now this strange sort of situation where Indian forces, as the reports are saying, had to sort of do warning shots. But as I keep saying, we will still take time. And I think before the formal statement from Indian side comes, it is only the guesstimates that we are making. We are only inferring what happened. We will hear, and most likely we will once again hear, varying interpretations and varying versions from both Chinese and Indian side. And that is going to continue because, there is a fundamental variation of perceptions on line of actual control itself. And both sides believe that that is their sovereign territory. And each time they sort of do any such encounter of this nature, invariably we have a very varying sort of versions coming up from both sides. But it's a serious matter that things are not really sort of stabilizing on the border. Every time there is a new element which is coming up, every time there is a new gray area, every time there is a new tactics which is being applied. So tension on the border is not seen to be coming down, despite the fact that brigade level meetings have already moved up to corps commander, lieutenant general level meetings.
Yes.
5 meetings have happened on the ground. So these are all proving to be ineffective in that sense. Yes. So I'm not sure what bold initiatives need to be taken to resolve and stabilize.
Yes, I was actually going to come to that. The development comes days after the Indian and Chinese side met in Moscow. Now, what is the reason that these diplomatic and military level talks have failed to yield any results? What do you think is the reason for this?
As an academic, I see that there was a chapter 1 of peace and tranquility on the border, which was initiated during 1988 visit of Rajiv Gandhi, which said, let us stabilize the border, build rest of the relationship, particularly economic relationship. But now in 30 years, both countries have transformed themselves as very, very influential, powerful nations. And therefore, their questions will also need to be redefined. As the foreign minister said, we have to look at the new equilibrium of our equations. And that is going to be a painstaking exercise, because all the mechanisms, all the conventions, treaties, mannerisms, how to deal with tensions, how to deal with such encounters and face-offs seems to be becoming ineffective, because both sides have enormous power projection capability. Both sides think they're extremely powerful. And now in COVID-19, I think apparently Chinese believe that they are going to take advantage of rest of the periphery being still sort of in middle of their pandemic crisis, and they think they've come out of COVID-19, and this is an opportune time to do some pushing and bullying around the periphery as they are doing now. So that, I think, is one-sided. The redefining of the relationship is not going to be very effective. It has to be mutually decided where the new equilibrium has to be discovered and built. And basically, both sides have to ensure stability on the border before any resolution can be spoken of. So disengagement can happen only if first stability is achieved. And if both sides see this ratcheting up happening repeatedly, then of course, first of all, disengagement itself becomes a problem. So far, what I know is Chinese are insisting on equal and mutual disengagement, which is not likely, because India and the rest of the world believes that Chinese have intervened first in a situation like this. They should go back first.
Yes.
And it cannot be equal and mutual. So I think there are fundamental problems and gaps that need to be bridged. I hope that the two foreign ministers who know each other for decades, should have this opportunity to use their personal chemistry in Moscow to give certain direction to, first of all, stabilize the situation on ground, and then move forward through Corps Commanders meetings to achieve disengagement before any new equilibrium can be discovered, as the foreign minister insists that we need to really start chapter 2 of finding a new equilibrium between two nations. And I think this is their chance to now directly negotiate and talk to each other. I hope they'll have a bilateral meeting.
Do you think there is any alternative to these diplomatic talks at this point, since clearly they are not working? Do you think there is any other alternative?
I'm not denying the fact that there are a large number of leverages that India has, and some of these leverages are being used lately. You can notice how we are engaging, various other elements of India's China policy. For example, how the Tibetans are being made more visible. You saw, a senior functionary of the ruling party attending the funeral of SFF officer who died recently. And therefore, I think there's a certain symbolisms from banning apps to making more public India's Vikas regiment and the role that they're playing on the border, which was under the wraps so far. Large number of diplomatic cards are being showcased to Chinese to send that message to Chinese. But apparently Chinese feel that they are extremely emboldened by this new equation of they having come out of COVID-19, and they need to push and bully around neighbors. And that mindset is deeper problem. And I think that is what needs to be addressed. And luckily we have a career diplomat now as foreign minister who not only knows Chinese leaders on first name basis, but possibly has a great grip on how to conduct foreign policy. So we are hoping that the meeting tomorrow would come out, they may not publicize their what they have spoken, but I hope it will give some direction to bring stability to the situation on the border.
All right, Professor Swaran, thank you so much for joining us with all those inputs. We will definitely keep tracking this as and when we have more details on the situation. And with that, it's time to slip into a short break, but don't go anywhere. Lots more on the other side. Keep watching.